So, hi, everybody. It's Tuesday, March 29th. This is the fifth of 5 sessions of Awakening Through Grief, Awakening from Grief, returning to ourself and allowing grief to be part of our process and to gain some support here, some techniques, some education, some information, some bolstering up, some music, some processes, and things have been offered over the course of these 5 weeks, and it's culminating tonight. I'm also writing about this in my website and my newsletter, which you're free to get, and it's free. And you enroll yourself by going to marthacreek.com and just signing up on the front page. And the topic this month is similar to what we've been looking at, the myths of grief that we fell under the spell of when we were young kids, and that's still operating in us today, and some of the ways to balance that out, hopefully, and to look at the consequences of not allowing for feelings and to any kind of habits or tendencies to continue to suppress, depress, disown the feelings instead of meeting them with some understanding. So thank you all. So you're welcome to sign up there. You're also welcome to send that on to anybody else in the world that could be benefited by that. I've also made available in the newsletter these 5 recorded sessions. Some of you have asked for them every week. You're welcome to have them, to re-listen to them, to learn from them, to continue, let the support be with you, close to you as your healing continues. And you're also welcome to share those with individuals, not a distribution list or not a group or not publicly, but to individuals that could be bolstered up or really supported in a specific loss or a grief period that they're in. Also, thank you sincerely for being here. And most of you, every single week that you show up here and continue to authentically, courageously, crazily, courageously say, choose yes to your soul, to your spiritual self-care, and to healing. And regardless of how difficult or uncomfortable it is and has been, you have done it repeatedly over and over and over again. So I bow to that, the uncommon motivation and uncommon stamina in you that would call you to do hard work and to choose life, even in the losses, to choose life and living, even in the grief, even in the deaths and the despairs of this. And I am happy to support you going forward any way I can. www.marthacreek.com. And we have a beautiful souls here with us tonight. Besides y'all's beautiful souls, we have guests here, Reverend Kathleen Flynn, who will be presenting on the topic of grief. And I'm going to have Kathleen to introduce herself so that you get her credentials specifically from her and the way she's been serving for decades in this. And we'll get to her in a few minutes. And then first, we've got my buddy, David Roth. Many of you know him, that volunteers his time and talent and energy from music that he's, as far as I know, wrote and recorded and does the music for, and is clearly guided to serve out into the world for matters of this human heartedness and our healing of our human heartedness. So David, deep thanks for you being here today, honey. And just come on in here and just get us present with a piece of music if you can. And then everybody will have arrived by then maybe, and then we'll move right into some teaching and education. So unmute yourself, honey, so we'll be sure to hear you.
It's my honor to be with you. There are days that are simply not okay. You get out of bed, you're on your way. This is one of those. There are cheerleaders and those who'd pump you up with platitudes and words that don't mean much. Not much at all. Oh, my friend, I will meet you where you are. I won't throw flower petals on your wounded heart. If it's not okay, we won't pretend. But if it's not okay, it's not the end. Aren't you stronger than you ever used to be? At least that's the way it seems to me. If not to you, aren't you the one who has made it all this way? No matter what those voices in your head might say, it's up to you. Oh, my friend, I will meet you where you are. I won't throw flower petals on your wounded heart. If it's not okay, we won't pretend. But if it's not okay, it's not the end. Looking through a broken glass, this too shall pass. There are times that are simply not okay. What you do with them, you get to say. You get to say. Oh, my friend, I will meet you where you are. I won't throw flower petals on your wounded heart. If it's not okay, we won't pretend. But if it's not okay, it's not the end.
Thank you, David. It inspires me every time I hear it, honey. And absolute another level of healing in me that as I rededicate and recommit myself not to throw flower petals on anybody's wounded heart and to absolutely reel myself in from yet one more platitude. Yet one more platitude. So learning as I go. And if I've thrown flower petals on any of your wounded hearts, I'm sincerely sorry. And for all the platitudes, I spent about 20 years teaching, preaching, espousing. Forgive it, please, forgive it. And if you can relate, be sure to forgive you. If you had a few minutes or weeks or decades of platitudes instead of processing. So David Roth is available for singing, spirit moving, inspiring song, spirit speaking, where it all meets and where it all converges. And it's obvious, hopefully, through these lyrics and through his presence here, what his heart and mind and mission is about. So David, thank you, honey. And I'll call on you a little later after we move through the program here. So Kathleen, thank you again for saying yes to this, honey, and reorganizing whatever you had to do this. So tell us about a little bit about you, honey, credential wise, a short bio, and how you're serving and have been serving for all these decades. And then you'll bring us our solid ground around this.
All right, great. Thank you. Thank you, Martha, for doing this wonderful series. It's every time we get an opportunity to talk about grief, death, or dying, we are advancing the human race, especially in the Western Hemisphere. It has been my honor to serve now for 20 plus some years, specifically in this field. But what I'm about to read to you will point to how long I really was conscious or being molded, being unfolded to step forward in this role. I'm going to read you just a short page and a half out of my book, which is coming this fall. And one of the chapters, it is not yet got one of those sexy titles. I've just labeled it. Grief Can Be Complicated, and it can. So I'll read this to you and then I'll tell you a little bit more. My father died in 1974. I was 29 years old. Mom struggled with grief. She still cried a lot and frequently talked about missing Dad as if he died the day before. I was unfamiliar with the whole idea of healthy grieving. Instinctively, I knew what Mom was experiencing was beyond the norm. Now, 4 years after Dad had died. Her involvement with work kept her occupied, and the nights and weekends, though, laid heavy on her soul, especially in the dark and cold of Alaska winters. She had worked hard for the state employees as a part of the labor group. Even with these involvements, going home to 2 little poodles did not fill the void. Her conversations with me and my brother and my sister always included the sadness of being alone and missing Dad. I was uncertain how to help her and becoming more concerned about her overall welfare. When the minister of our church announced a presentation by the author of On Death and Dying, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, I eagerly found tickets thinking there may be insights, at least some guidance on where to find support for the aching hearts experiencing loss. If there were grief support groups in Anchorage in 1978, I didn't know about them. And I mean, I really didn't know about them. That grief support, I didn't know, was done in groups. Hospice in Anchorage seems to have established in about 1980, so it wasn't even on the roadmap yet. Medicare began paying for hospice in 1982. Hospice provides bereavement programs. Mom had already declined seeing a counselor. Unfortunately, counseling for an independent Montana-born woman, an Alaska communication aviation pioneer, was not on her radar screen. Kubler-Ross is well known. I'm sure you all know of her. She pioneered the communication. She put the subject out there about death and dying. She brought the topic into everyday conversation beginning in the 60s. Now, death was taboo in many American homes, at least talking about it. It wasn't ours. When asked to share about first experience of death in grief support groups, the stories often reflect the stoicism that the people of my mother's era practiced. What was our first experience of loss or of observing others in loss? Maybe how we respond even now. How did what we experienced then teach us about grief? How do we replicate that behavior in our own experience of loss? The first time I saw my father cry, I was 5 years old. I was climbing the steep steps to my bedroom on the second story of our house, and the staircase was darker than usual. I looked up to see my father slowly descending, eyes filled with tears, silently sobbing. I had never seen him look so sad. He sat down on the stairs, put his head in his hands, and cried. I did not know what to do. Language used today to help children understand adult emotions was not taught or shared in our home, and I suspect in many homes in circa 1954. Children who are experiencing untypical adult behavior can be confused and feel insecure. I recall making myself very small and backing down the staircase. I learned later that my stepbrother, Michael, had died at age 15. I was uncertain how to be. I hardly knew him. My sadness was for my dad's sadness, and I had no idea what to do with that. Fast forward 28 years, my ability to help my mother was similar, and I did not know who to ask or what to do. Death and dying were not family conversations in my world. So, in the many programs that I've studied in, there's always the requirement or request to write about or share about how we got where we are. And there are so many examples in the 56 years I was in Alaska that I was called on before I had any training at all to be with others who were experiencing traumatic death, sudden death. And those experiences are deeply founded in the work I do. They taught me. I'm not so sure I was such, a great benefit in those circumstances as young as I was, but I was a warm body with a caring heart and an open mind to learning what these circumstances, seeing people in traumatic grief. I didn't decide to work in this area until I came to Oregon in 2001. I do, and there I went to Oregon to be, I thought, in an art therapist, and I applied for school at Merrillhurst and entered the graduate program. And then I became acquainted with many of the people who were studying in the religious studies department. And there was a program called Applied Theology. And I thought that was very interesting. And what they taught was how to become a chaplain, how to prepare yourself for even more study. So I graduated from that program. I went into my residency at the hospital, 2 residencies actually. And about 5 or 6 years after I got to Oregon, I was offered a position at a hospice in the Columbia Gorge. And again, at first, I'm not sure that I was all that wonderful at being in that position because I had a lot to learn. And I did, and I became passionate about the work. After so many years of that, like 8 or 9 years, I felt the calling. I also had worked with Unity and been an associate to the minister in Lake Oswego when I became a hospice chaplain. And after a while, I was out roaming around the hills of Oregon from one home to another, driving through the ranch fields and going into these really rural locations. And for about a year, I would get these messages. I'd be thinking, I said, gee, that would make a really good talk. And then that led me to seek to be a congregational minister. And I was ordained as a unity minister after that work. However, I have to tell you, chaplaincy is my first calling. And I'm so glad. Now and I moved to Santa Fe. I'm still working for the hospital in Santa Fe. I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. My ministry was in Roseburg, Oregon, and this is a very important thing, exposure, a very important time and place event in my life, because it links to one of the things I want to talk about tonight, and that is disenfranchisement from grief. On October 1st, 2015, a random shooter killed 10 people at our community college and injured 9 more. That was a time, again, when I wasn't sure how to help, what to do other than to be willing. There was no one, there was actually one congregant in our congregation that was directly affected. His niece was injured. And how does a community grieve that? We sat as a congregation the Sunday after, and the newspaper came and wanted to be with us, wanted to write a story about grief in our community. And we talked about everyone is entitled to grieve. This is a disruption of our community. This is a huge loss. The energy here has totally shifted. We are in national news. And taking a deep breath and giving permission. Maybe in Roseburg, it was the first time that some of my congregants and I had an opportunity to talk about grief. You see, because every time there's something that you're remotely related to, it has the propensity to trigger in us what's still running in the background. I call it like elevator music. It just happens. And we don't know how to handle it. The first thing that we need to do, I believe, is embrace the right to grieve. And I want to say to you that not taking those opportunities can lead to a situation that I call the Hallmark story in my book. When my father died, he and I were not on the best terms, so it was complicated grief for me as well. And without going into all the details or the story, I had just decided that it was his time and we were probably safer and better with him gone. He died in January. In December that year, I was in front of the Hallmark card row and picking out Christmas cards, and then overhead, the song came on, the Christmas song came on, Silent Night. That was my father's favorite song. And I became a puddle in the middle of the aisle in this drugstore, not really understanding what was going on because I had dismissed my need to grieve. I had dismissed my right to grieve because I was angry with him. I hadn't forgiven him yet. And yet, inside the unconscious, and I really think too, it's a stirring of the Holy Spirit in us that says, come forward. Let's open your heart. Let's deal with this. Let's address this. Because unforgiveness doesn't hurt anyone but you or me. Hurts me. So disenfranchisement about grief. I was talking to a lovely person today who has been divorced for a number of years and has been told that her former husband has a stage 4 cancer. And she's so very confused about how to feel about that. It was a contentious separation. It was not kind. And yet she has all these emotions. What do I do with this? How do I and when she came to a break in her speaking, when she took a breath or two, I said, it sounds to me like you do not believe you can grieve this. Is that true? Or if it isn't, can you speak a truth? And she said, well, yeah, we said such awful things to each other. Am I entitled? I said, yes, you are. Yes, you were. You invested in this relationship. And even though we treat each other sometimes really ugly in relationships, you are entitled to grief. Losses are across the board. I mean, we have so many losses. And I've listened in on a few, not the entire presentations, but enough to know that in this Zoom room, there are some very traumatic situations and losses. Would you agree? And I love so much what you said. I think, Jerry, you spoke last week and you spoke about being angry. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And here's something that is another important, I mean, I could run through some drills here with you, but the things that I felt called to speak with you about tonight is another one of those, is the difference between trauma, sudden death, or traumatic sudden death, and a prolonged death or a hospice death, which might be 6 months. That's a requirement when you're on hospice. Sometimes people are on hospice longer. I think you have to take those apart. I don't think they're always, not always, I don't think they are alike. The people that I know that have, because I've been with them in the ER, and they have just gotten there before their beloved takes their last breath from an injury of a gunshot wound, a terrible auto accident, a multiple injury accident. These traumas need to be addressed in a very delicate and loving way. I don't think we can begin to grieve until we have addressed the trauma. And I do know that repeating the story over and over and over again with a trauma is just teaching your soul to re-experience it. When I work with people with trauma, I listen to where they're going. When I first talk to them, I say, you do not have to tell me the story. I am here to be with you and listen and let it go where they need it to go. I wonder if you would share just by raising your hand to tell me how many of you are dealing with a death due to a traumatic experience? Okay, okay, all right. Well, I hope you have had support and love and listening and tenderness and gentling. Sometimes those pictures and those memories are very hard to deal with. And those who come to grief support group, and I usually, well, I do know their stories before they come. I always spend time with them. They don't usually work very well in a grief support group because they have trauma that they need to address. And we find them support for that. Sudden death isn't necessarily traumatic. But I will tell you, I don't think anyone's died in our family that hasn't been a sudden death. Every single one of them has been. A sudden death, I mean, you're talking to them the day before, the night before, they're in your home, you had breakfast. And unless they're in their late 80s or 90s, it's a shock, right? That needs to be addressed before we can move forward with the education about grief and how to move through grief. Now you're hearing my opinions and I am open to hearing anyone's opinion who it has a different experience. But I do want to respect also that there is a period of time when a person just cannot engage to move forward until they have addressed the foundational issues. In the ER, when there's been a trauma and we're with family or I'm with a family, there is a key that says, key wording that says, now they're ready to move forward. They'll sitting with someone and they'll just talk and usually ramble, and then the grief waves come, and then back to being able to verbalize again the pivotal point. And I'm telling you this also as ministers, because quite frankly, what we do at the hospital is wonderful, but if I can get a hold of somebody's minister and they know each other, that is what needs to happen, or a family member, of course, a family member that they might want to have called. The pivotal words to know when they're ready is, well, what comes next? Something like that. When they're ready to talk, then when they're ready to be in the present with you, they know they now know you're in the room. Before your energy, they knew there was a warm body there. And I'll tell you a quick story about a situation that happened with our priest at Christus St. Vincent Hospital in Santa Fe. He encountered a woman he'd helped in the ER room, and I love working with this man in the ER because he's just all heart and people can tell it right away. And he was telling me, we're very close friends, and he said, do you remember that circumstance? And I was remembering, oh yeah, I remember that. And he said, I saw her. It'd been about 6 months. I saw her in the grocery store. And she came up to me and she said, oh, Father, it's so good to see you. I can't help, but I want to thank you for all that you did for me that night, all that you helped me with, and especially for what you said. And they finished their conversation, gave her a hug, and he came in the next morning and he said, Kathleen, I never said anything. I was just there, holding her in sacred space. he really didn't say anything. And I've been with him. I know he does not talk a lot when this is going on. He's a wonderful presence. So I'm kind of segueing into a part of this presentation that I was hoping might be helpful for all of you, if you're ministers or as friends or family members. It's about being with a griever. But I thought we might, Martha and I had talked about, we might just have a little breakout group. How many groups do you usually do, Martha?
Five with 4 people.
Okay, so I'm going to share screen and bring up a little slide, and then we'll go into breakout. And this slide will have the questions on it that you will talk about. And the whole idea is I should ask this question first. Let me get out of this again. Raise your hand if you think this would be helpful for you.
You mean how to be with a griever?
Yes,
Yeah.
having that discussion with each other. I'm sorry. Thank you, Martha, for clarification.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So I think that's most of you, right? I didn't get the count, but it looked like a
Sure.
lot.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. So just a second here. I'm going to share the screen, and this is the question. Is this going to pop right up? Are you seeing that?
What was the most helpful thing?
Anyone ever did? Let me move my, okay. What was the most helpful thing anyone ever did with or for you in grief? Or that you did for or with someone else when they were grieving? So Martha, will you, before we go, I'm going to peek at the chat room here. Is there something I need to know before this?
Not at all, honey. Yeah.
Okay.
So make a note of these questions, because we'll stop sharing the screen, then I'll put you over into the group. And you're free to share, of course, to discuss, and you're free to pass. So there's no requirements here. What was the most helpful thing anyone ever did for or with you in grief? What have you did that you thought was helpful, or they reported was helpful in their times of grief? And I'd like to just throw in there some similar to what we've talked about in the other weeks, which is what have you done for you in
Yeah.
your grief? So if you don't feel like you've really been there for somebody, or you normally do some of this by yourself, what are you doing and what have you done to process through and be with your own grief? And you're free to share or pass and just hold space for yourself and one another. So will you stop to share now here?
Okay.
They
I
won't
can-
be able to see this from their groups, honey.
They understand, everybody understands. Okay, here we go.
And then we'll give you 10 minutes, and then we'll bring you back into this big room, and we'll finish up there, have another piece of music, and you'll have a chance to get Kathleen's information, David's information, and then Roseanne's information with how she's going to serve after this week. So here we go into groups. Just be present. I'll be the timekeeper, and we'll bring you back when it's time. And receive, receive, receive. Information.
In the chat, sure. Okay. Here we go. I hope that was helpful for everyone. What the 3 people I was with indicated was, wait a second here. Share. Okay. Was that so? Oh, why isn't this showing up? There we go. You know, what happens when we're trying to support a griever is, first we have to figure out what's our own comfort level with grief. You know, I mean, I'm probably the Emmy Award winner for the wrong thing to say for a lot of years, because I used the same terms I'd always heard. So I encourage you to assess your own comfort level with grief and being with another person's grief to support them. So how to be with a griever, and repeatedly the three people that were in our breakout session were talking about the inappropriate things that people do, the things well-meaning but not appropriate. And I know you've talked about some of this, but I thought maybe these tips might help. Avoiding someone or not acknowledging their loss because you don't know what to say or because you don't want to upset them is a mistake. By ignoring their experience, you make them feel as if their loss doesn't matter or that they don't matter. Do say or do these things. And here's the one I really love. I can't imagine what you're going through. Now that says the truth, because we can't possibly imagine what someone else is going through. Or as Martha uses, I'm broken, heartbroken for you, or my heart aches for you in this time of loss. So we're acknowledging the loss. If you knew the person who died, share a story about them, and that's very effective. Avoid saying these things, and you've been over these in your sessions already. At least you had blank years together. Oh, dear God. And at least they're not suffering anymore. These are not helpful things to say. Or you can have other children. Oh my gosh, I've been with parents who've lost a child. That would be not welcome. You have others, or that you have other siblings. Time does not heal all wounds. Time alone does not heal. Time plus active grief work does lead to recovery. And I know that, is it Roseanne? You are a grief recovery specialist. You know, I know you will affirm this, that it takes active grief work to overcome. I don't believe we ever heal. I think that we get to a place where we adjust and we can manage our grief, and we're much lighter. But that loss will always be with us, always be a part of the griever's life. Do or say something concrete. I'll call you tomorrow and we can talk if you feel up to it. Or, Jerry, this one's for you. Here's a casserole to take the pressure off fixing a meal. Yeah, that's not always the most welcome thing either. We decided that the most welcome thing to say to someone is, what do you need right now? What do you need? And can I do that for you? Do say, I know that you move forward with your dear one's love ever present in your heart. I mean, these sound kind of canned, but you can make them sound like your own. I know that you're becoming a new person and I'm here for you as you grow. I think this is not an early grief one. I think this comes a little later, when people begin to understand that they are becoming a new person because their relationships have changed. Now I'm going to put my information right here. Oops, that don't mail anything to that address. I haven't changed this. My Gmail and my phone are what you can pick up right here. And I'll put that in the chat room too.
Thank you, Kathleen.
I love doing this, Martha, and especially with you. You are, oh, I just love you so much and appreciate you for your openness and your desire to serve and help people move through these very challenging times in their life. Thank you for inviting me.
So she's going to put her information in the chat. And if you will go ahead and do that, Roseanne's going to provide a Zoom link. She'll also be present at the same time, all during the next month on Tuesday nights. And you know how to contact me. David, thanks again for being here, honey. Will you heal our hearts with another piece of music? No pressure.
Only I could. That's an inside job. What a beautiful presentation, Kathleen. I lived in Alaska and the Pacific Northwest.
David. Oh,
yeah.
David.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
wanted to thank you for your beautiful song. I moved
Sure.
too quickly, but
No.
yeah.
I needed every word that you said tonight, and
Mm.
I've tried to capture some of them in something that I've never played before. So,
Okay.
I loved when you said warm body, caring heart, and open mind. But then when you said about embracing the right to grieve, that kind of got me going. I'm not even sure how this goes myself, but I'm embracing my right to grieve. I'm embracing my right to grieve. When I don't forgive, I'm hurting me. I'm embracing my right to grieve. And a story is all that it is. A story is all that it is. There's no need to retell or to relive. A story is all that it is. Being held in a sacred space. Being held in a sacred space is what I can offer you today. Being held in a sacred space. So I'm embracing my right to grieve. I'm embracing my right to grieve. When I don't forgive, I'm hurting me. I'm embracing my right to grieve. I'm embracing my right to grieve.
So beautiful. So beautiful.
Thank you, David. Thank you, honey. So hearts, hearts, hearts everywhere. So give yourself a big heart hug. And whatever way, over, under, over again, on your face, as Janine taught us. So any kind of comfort, honey, we extend to you here in your human heartedness. And great thanks for you as you continue your recovery and your tiny, large actions in your grief healing and grief process. And know that you have us, me personally, and everybody here, I'd say, cheering for you and not in a hurry for you, but allowing for you to have whatever process is necessary. Thank you, each and every one of you that's been here. Jerry, for your presentation, and Allie and Roseanne and Janine and David and Kathleen. And who did I forget? Well, they'll have some forgiveness for me, apparently. And stay tuned. Any classes that I offer, you're welcome to join them. And all of this is available to you on recording by emailing me. So Godspeed, and I'll hang around here a few minutes. We'll end this call officially, the class, stop the recording, and then I'll hang around if you've got something that